Good morning to you once again on the business desk at this hour. Industry representatives have raised the red flag on the future of customer risk profiling, saying it shouldn't prioritize exclusion. Historically, credit checks have been used by lenders to understand financial behavior. However, the method also excludes many consumers, as found by a global report conducted by TransUnion. That report indicates that more than 27 million South African consumers are considered either credit unserved or underserved as a result of this practice. Co-founder of Rentoza, Mishan Ratan, speaks to us about this. Thank you so much for your time. Let's talk about the risks to the criteria currently when it comes to the South African banking system.
Good morning. So what are the sort of the risk acceptance criteria? I think we can start there, right? So when people apply for credit, so an institution would check if there's a listing on a credit bureau, plus, an affordability check, which is based on financial commitments versus gross income. And they use about a rule of thumb of about 35%. Now, like you've mentioned, this excludes around 27 million people in SA, and this is considered underserved and unserved customers in South Africa. So people with, minimal credit participation or people that have no credit participation at all. And this doesn't just, isn't segmented to sort of one part of the economy or one part of the population. It spreads across all income groups. And even good earners with no or minimal credit history are excluded due to the inability for them to make the credit risk criteria. Now, if you look at 27 million people, that's sort of, half the population. So what you're doing is excluding half the population from actively participating in the economy for the things that they need and want. This is why it's really exclusionary.
And we've seen cases that have attempted to take this matter to the courts, even when it comes to certain mortgages. Let's talk about what criteria and risk should really be branded like in a sort of new way of doing things in South Africa.
Yeah, well, we believe, it shouldn't just be an affordability equation, really. I think, the world has evolved quite a bit, and you need to look at things very differently, right? And things will continue to be looked at very differently into the future as we access more information. So it has to be a combined view of sort of qualitative and quantitative information or data. So not only do you have to look at the, the financial data, which we traditionally look at, but you also have to look at customer preferences. So let's take an example, right? So take a person that's focused, mainly on health and wellness. Although they might not have, the indicators by traditional financial standards to access the products they need for their health and wellness, say, fitness products, healthy food choices, and even expert healthcare, right? And alike. We know from the data that we've gathered and from their purchasing behavior that they will always prioritize these things in their lives. And we believe that this should be taken into consideration. I mean, information about behaviors and choices is much more easily available in the digital age and can be used to augment this data and build a better analysis when people are reaching out to, for funds to support their lifestyle. It's something that, we constantly look at and evolve for every customer when we put them through our behavioral risk model at Rentoza.
And given that the digitization of economic activity has advanced, especially from the times of COVID-19 and strict lockdowns, to what extent is the traditional banking system changing its own models, or how far are we to get to that particular point where we say exclusion is no longer an element when we look at criteria?
Honestly, I don't think I have a real answer for that in terms of the banks. But what I can say is that banks are, for the most part, solid institutions, especially in SA, and have always had the lion's share of deposits and transactions. I think the more pertinent thing to think about and for them to think about is how do they support new models, right? Because there's always these new businesses that are popping up that are looking at customers differently. So, what they need to do, in our opinion, is to support these businesses. And if they do, this will be, a real win for them and for everyone, right? And the reason being is that, without credit, you're excluding a major portion of the economy. But by utilizing these businesses like these new behavioral risk models, what you're doing is you're also including other parts of the economy or population that previously did not have access to these products. So, for example, a younger generation will obviously have an issue accessing credit and products and those kind of things. With the models like subscription, for example, you're able to bring these customers in because it's a behavioral analysis, and you start pulling these, the younger generation into the financial system. And with them, starting to transact on a more continuous basis, you're starting to see, some sort of track record being built. And remember, always on the back of these models is going to be, this payments backbone that's run by the bigger businesses and financial institutions. So what they need to think about then is, how do they leverage this information and these models to effectively assess customers into the future? Because they'll have a multitude of data passing through these systems that will enable them to start figuring out, how the wider part of the population behaves and have better information on it, and maybe start building, products that speak to this population that can be, sort of in isolation, or help them start figuring out how to assess customers in a very, very different way. So I think that, it's not about banks, changing everything that they're doing and really looking at all. I think it's about them augmenting what they're doing by supporting these new age businesses that are coming up, which will allow them to give them access to this information and start helping them build and evolve into the future.
We'll leave it there. Mishan Ratan of Rentoza talking to us about customer profiling. We move on now to other news making international business headlines. That's as the Chinese